Hi, everybody. It's Matt Scudero with the Credit Research Foundation. Welcome to our March 2021 forum. We have an absolutely fantastic topic for you today. And in addition to that, we have just three absolutely wonderful speakers, folks that are extremely knowledgeable about their field and on a topic that is impacting every credit professional in the marketplace. Let's start with the topic first, and then we'll keep going from there. The topic today is learnings from the third-party collection perspective. And what you're going to find is we have a group that's going to talk about not only the learnings in from COVID-19, but what learnings they think will stick as we go forward. We'll have learnings about regulatory changes that are taking place, and one that I think is going to be really interesting for folks, which is trends and outlooks at the end. So you're going to want to really tune into this topic. And it's also unique for us because we have the opportunity to have three platinum partners with us today. So we have Commercial Collections Agencies of America, we have ABC Omega, and we have AG Adjustments. Our speakers are Annette Waggoner, Sam Fensterstock, and Dominic DiLoretto. And folks, it is just great to have you with us, and what an honor to have three platinum partners on the stage at one time. For those folks that do not know, these three platinum partners not only provide economic support to the foundation, but you also know that they continue to provide a tremendous amount of learnings to the discipline and to the foundation itself. And CRF is extremely thankful for all that you do. So welcome to today's presentation. And again, it's great to have you with us. We have a tremendous amount of content, so I want to hand the baton off pretty quickly to Annette Waggoner so she can start with us. Annette is going to be our moderator. Sam and Dominic are going to share their knowledge with us as well. And again, why don't we pass the baton and let you guys go to town with the topic.
Thank you very much, Matt. It is a pleasure to be here today on behalf of the association, and certainly to be joined by Dom DiLoretto, Senior Vice President of ABC Omega, and Sam Fensterstock, Senior Vice President of AG Adjustments. So thank you, gentlemen. I know we worked really hard to create some great content, so let's get started. First of all, I'd like to tell you that this information is intended to be not to be legal advice. It may not be used as legal advice. It's legal advice must be tailored to the specific circumstances of each case. As you know, every effort has been made to assure the information is up to date. It's not intended to be a full and exhaustive explanation of the law in any area, nor should it be used to replace the advice of your legal counsel. So now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, like I said, on behalf of the association, thank you for having us. For those that don't know, Commercial Collection Agencies of America is a platinum partner of the Credit Research Foundation, as is ABC Omega and AG Adjustments. The association has the most tenured commercial collection practitioners in the United States. It offers the highest level of certification in the United States to those commercial agencies. Once they attain the certification, they are among the most superior agencies. Their peers have been certified for over 4 decades. They do this by meeting the standards of the industry. So those standards, those certification requirements are promulgated by an independent standards board. That independent standards board is made up of all types of ARM professionals. The vice chair of that board is our own Bill Bauduino. So the organization is triadic in nature. That means that in addition to the certified agencies, we also have creditors' rights attorneys, and we also have law list publishers. So we can just jump right into this. We thought that we would offer to you our learnings from third-party agencies and how collections have changed since COVID-19. We're also going to offer our commentary on a work-from-home environment. So we're going to start off, and Dom, I'm going to throw it to you. Both gentlemen are going to give us their impressions, their learnings of what that they have seen in the last year. Dom?
Thanks, Annette. Appreciate the time. As far as learnings, first off, our contingency plans that we had in place worked to a T. We were so pleased with how things happened when everything was work from home. Our investment in equipment and workstations, telephony, webcams, Slack, and other forms of communication, Zoom, it enabled us to pivot and everybody's using the word pivot lately, pivot our staff to 100% work from home without missing a day of work. So it's one of the first things we learned is that we really had our stuff together as far as contingency planning. We bolstered our management as well. Management to staff ratio it used to be 1 to 25 when we were in the office, and we went down to 1 to 8 to really be able to make sure that working from home was being productive, and it paid off. During COVID, business changed, and many of our clients asked us maybe to work with a little bit slightly softer touch and provide a little extra level of sensitivity when we were contacting their customers. It was just normal. No one wanted to be the big bad debtor, creditor that was holding the line. So, and they also wanted to offer more flexibility in payment arrangements. We learned that. And most importantly, from our standpoint at ABC, we learned that our collection staff can easily adapt and generate strong results no matter where they work from each day. They further demonstrated their commitment to excellence, and 2020 was our best recovery year ever in spite of the challenges of the pandemic.
That sounds great. You know, we hear that a lot, especially about the pivoting to the home environment, but also the softer touch. Across the board, the agencies who met during the pandemic, we had numerous open forums similar to Credit Research Foundation, and that was a reoccurring theme that we heard that were offered, that our agencies offered to debtors. Sam, did you find the same thing? What did you find?
Yeah, I mean, I can almost, reiterate everything that Dom just said, almost word for word. We experienced at AGA a very similar. We had a very similar experience as ABC had. AGA, we had a situation in, I think it was 2012 with Hurricane Sandy, where we actually got knocked offline for like 2 days. Our servers, everything was all local. Our technology was structured in a way that we were susceptible for going out. We had to move everything to a hotel for a period of time until, power came back. We never wanted to experience that again. And so while we had thought, our contingency plan was really designed for a weather event, which is we changed our infrastructure. We bought all new computer systems. We put everything in the cloud. We made a situation where every collector could take the box off their desk and take it and plug it in at their house. And it had their phone on it. It had their access to their system or their system on it. Those who couldn't, they could VPN into our office. So we actually did what probably ABC did. We created the infrastructure, but not out of it came out of a need because of a catastrophic event. We just never thought that event was going to happen again and last for, a year. So thank God that we were in that position. And I know that there are a lot of agencies that weren't in that position. I had the luxury of speaking to a lot of my clients, and, Tom probably saw it the same way as we did. We actually benefited from getting business from clients who were maybe using other agencies that didn't have the backup and contingency plans in place, and their businesses were adversely affected. They couldn't deliver the level of service, that we were able to. So, I'm pretty happy we did that. One of the other things is that, as Dom said, he saw that, there are people very capable of working from home. We've actually sent people home full time. There are people, we were a call center environment where we had everybody in a call center, right? In New York, Arizona, 2 call centers. People came in every morning, 8:30, out at 4:30, whatever the time frame was, and that's how they work. And we expected them to be in that call center. And there's still value to having the call center and having the ability to hear people and interact. However, we recognize that we had certain collectors that were experienced enough that we could send home full time, and they were doing the same level of work, that they were, and they didn't have to travel an hour and a half each way to get there. And there's a whole bunch of other things that added to their quality of life, and they were able to still do the same job. We also were able to free up space in our offices to use that as a training place now as we're moving forward, where people are coming back to the office. So, just like ABC, we're able to pivot, and I think there's, we're silver linings people, right? So we see some, good things for our business that have transpired, out of this. And just like Dom also, we brought in some additional management during the time. And we actually were in the process of changing our organizational structure. So that organizational structure change definitely fed into, going into teams and smaller teams so that they can be managed easier. Work at home is a challenging situation for certain people. We definitely did see challenges with people who didn't have, the best internet capabilities, depending on where they lived. Obviously people with, a certain age range of children that, they needed to be involved with because of the fact that kids were home from school. So I think that there, obviously there are challenges, but good companies, as Dom used the word pivot, you pivot, you figure things out, you adapt and you change and you
Sure.
you got to survive.
Yeah.
Now, at the standpoint of what Dom said about collections, one of the challenging things that we saw early on was, when a lot of businesses transitioned to home, right? You had, let's say you're collecting against corporates, right? You're going to find that AP department. Well, that person is no longer in that department. They're at their home. Well, maybe if they didn't set up their phone to route their phone to their cell phone or however they set it up, it was harder to connect the dots. You had to do a little bit more. You had to do a little bit more work. You also saw, and we saw this on the sales side as well. People's voicemails were full, right? You were calling people and they weren't cleaning out their voicemails. They didn't forward stuff, and then you call their office and then you can't leave a message for them because voicemails. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of that, and I think that sort of as people adjusted, to working from home and trying to put everything in line, they got used to handling those scenarios, and we're seeing less and less of that now. So I think we've got to adapt.
Yeah, and you touched on something that, there are a lot of practices, which brings us to our next point, a lot of practices that we absolutely can carry forward as agency people into a post-COVID-19 environment. You touched on that, Sam, if you want to explain a little bit more, and then we'll go to Dom and he'll talk a little bit about what ABC is going to carry forward. Some really good practices, Sam.
Yeah, well, once again, we've already changed how our company is managed and organized because of COVID, and we're going to keep doing. That's going to stay with us going forward. We're probably going to have 20% of our workforce working from home full time. That was never a consideration. There's an agency out there that's all work from home. I'm friends with the owners, and we would have these debates all the time about it. How hard it is to train. How hard it is for have that camaraderie. You're in a call center, you're listening to another collector make a phone call, they say something, you hear that, you use it in your call. When you're working from home, you don't have that. However, when you have a certain level of collector, they don't need that, right? They're beyond that. They're good enough. And like at AGA, we would only let a collector work from home. Typically, they work for us for 10 years and they're moving to Texas and they want to still work for us, right? Now we're actually hiring work from home collectors. People have worked from home previously, and
different environment.
Yeah, and so now, we were limited to just hiring people who would work in Arizona or in New York, we're now open to hiring people who are career collectors working from home.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that great? That opens up so many opportunities for your company's recruiting needs. Do you find the same thing, Dom?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that we discovered. We, as many collection agencies are, we tend to be control freaks. We like to make sure everything's under one roof. And the remote collector was always something of a quality assurance concern that we had and performance. This just solidified that the borders have opened for us, that we can now start to recruit people anywhere in the United States, be able to provide them with training virtually, all of the recruitment, all of the ramping up, getting them the proper equipment, and monitoring and watching their recoveries come in just through what COVID taught us. So that is a carry forward, definitely. The other things we found is a carry forward that made us better. I have to say it even further was we found that we had to put more time and resources into skip tracing due to many of our clients, like Sam said, that our clients' customers are working from home. So that really further improved our intel efforts before number one call was made by the collector. because they're not in their usual place of business, and you've got to find them. That's not an excuse. You've got to find them.
We did the same thing. We did the same thing as Dom. We made a big investment in skip tracing this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a key focus. Number one, I had to do a lot of skip tracing, taking less time to do the skip tracing. Skip tracing can be a very labor intensive process, right? Depending on the tools that you use. So we made some investment in the, what we think are the best tools around to allow us to do a lot more skip tracing in a shorter period of time, because we knew we had to skip trace a lot more accounts this year. So that definitely was a big. Now, one of the big challenges, and Dom could probably test this, we talked about training. Training, is a hard one. Making a very experienced collector and training them on AGA's way is not as difficult as taking a not a seasoned collector and training them. It's that's the one you want to have in a call center, because the fact they get all the feedback from what's going on around them. But once again, with a collector who's experienced, who's got 5-10 years of experience working for an agency, yes, remote was never a possibility to AGA before, and now it is.
And that we hear that from a lot of agencies. First, we talked about recruiting a little bit, and this can even go into the process changes that are made at the agency level. We talked about recruiting, and one of the hardest things I think for managers at a collection agency is the turnover of the baseline collectors. We see that at the association, we hear about that a lot. Having this expanded opportunity, right, of recruiting from anywhere and having them work remotely, I think is going to just change the landscape completely. Yeah. Then another process change, and we can go to the next slide, Matt. The process change at the agency level, you touched on skip tracing. Out of necessity, right? People were working from home and their voicemails were full. And we keep saying this word, but you really did have to pivot. You had to change the way that your collectors, your managers, your C-level staff, your C-level executives were actually attending to the function of your everyday operations. Did you find, so Dom, tell us a little bit more. We touched on those process changes. Do you have a couple more that you want to share with us?
Yeah, again, in the spirit of how we like to manage our performance, what we did is we ramped up our succession planning of our management and our team leaders. When you're working from home, you've got to have that type of follow-up and coaching and motivating of your staff each and every day. Everybody needs a little bit of an attaboy. And what we did is we had our team leaders rise to the occasion, where they were also in the succession planning of management, so that there was that 1 to 8 coverage where we used to have 1 to 25. And that helped us to ensure that we could yield those strong recoveries in 2020 despite COVID. And when we return to the office, we're going to stay along that same 1 to 8 model because of that. And we increased our quality assurance reviews. We used to do them on a weekly basis with all of our staff. We've got AI software that records every single phone call that's made in, that comes in or is made out. And usually on a weekly basis, we would go through and review with our collectors the good, bad, and where some things need to be improved. And we switched it to daily, just because, again, working from home, you just don't know, because you don't have control of that environment. And we found that it worked really well. The collectors were receptive to it. They understood it. And it worked and paid off just terrifically. Again, people being adapt to change was the key in everything. People are always the key in any business. It's always about their attitude towards change. And
isn't that the truth?
All the time.
Absolutely.
We were very similar. AGA, once again, we were very similar in that regard. As I said before, we realigned our entire collection operations, when this all happened, went to a more of a team-centric model. We had just hired a new VP of operations like 2 months before the pandemic happened, part of what he was going to do was come in and help, reanalyze the structure. So this sort of forced him into it pretty quickly, 2 months on the job. And we realigned, how we managed the team. Now, one of the things that maybe was different from us than you guys, Don, is that, in around, I think it maybe was June or July timeframe, whenever they went to where you could have, 50% capacity in a building in New York, our building was actually laid out where even at maximum capacity, we were only at 75% based on how the type of cubicles we had, the way everything was laid out. So we went through a transition period of time where we actually went back to 50% and then went up to 75%, which was actually 100%, but we never were 100% because we still had people who were staying home because of, health issues and because of childcare issues. So it was really an option for our collectors at that point, those who wanted to work in the office, as long as we were in line with New York State requirements, we're allowed to, and the ones who stayed home were allowed to. And now we're actually going to be going to like a hybrid, going forward, where we will have some people who will work 2 days in the office and 2 days from home,
Sure.
Depending on their scenario. I think what this all did, and Don could say the same, is that, as he said, we're agency guys. Like we are, thumb on the people, right? We've become a little bit more flexible because what we've recognized is that people, if they deliver the results, the flexibility can be there. And as Dom said, they had record year, we did as well. And so, it just goes to show. Now think about this. You mentioned also, collector retention, biggest thing for both of us, right? Just like Amy, I'm sure similar for them, our collection staff, 60%, a little bit more, are core collectors that have been with us for, 8, 9, 10 years. These are people who are AJ family members, they've been with our company, and they're not going anywhere. And then we have the other people that are, turnover anywhere between 2 and 5 years. Someone who is 25 takes a collection job. By the time they're 30, they're looking for something else. I mean, we all know the type of position a collector job is. We like to think at AGA, it's, we make it a pretty good job the way we pay and things of that nature. But we also think that, having these more flexible work environments, and if you think about, the millennials and younger folks and what a lot of jobs are offering as far as work environment, especially going forward,
You have to compete.
we're hoping that this will be something that aids to our employee retention in the fact that, if someone was driving an hour to get to our office, right? They don't have to anymore if they can work and therefore maybe it's going to help us keep that employee, a little longer.
Absolutely. And we see that a lot. One thing that we chatted about, and I know that this is a change but because you two come from tenured agencies that have been certified for a long time, one of the most important things I think that we saw is, how do we maintain maximum recovery, right? And we talked a little bit before about effective communication. Somebody had mentioned about a voicemail that was full, right? So how did you guys find that your collectors were still maintaining that effective communication with your debtors to attain that maximum recovery? Great years for your agencies. How did you find that you had to change? I mean, I know from about what you found. Sam, do you want to start a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what we found is that, Annette, you went out on the question. I couldn't hear the whole thing. My internet went out. Just repeat what you just.
I'm sorry. Sure. I was saying that one of the changes that was made was that collectors had to communicate more effectively, more uniquely with the debtor, right? So I've heard from a lot of agencies, how did they do that? How they actually did that. Share with me a little bit how your collectors would effectively communicate with the debtors. And then we're going to go to Dom.
There's only really these days 2 ways you collect money, right? It's by phone or by email. I mean, that's the way you communicate with a debtor. right? Obviously, when someone's not answering the phone, email is your primary form of communication. And as Dom said earlier, with the messaging, we changed our messaging around for our, on behalf of our clients to have a more compassionate message, to allow them to understand that, the thought is more about helping people out. And that was the same message on the phone we got to people, but as Dom also alluded to, and I said before, the shift tracing became a big piece of that because we had to go out and find, okay, here's a business, you're calling them up, it's a restaurant, they're closed, right? I don't happen to have the owner's phone number, they don't have a personal guarantee with the agency, but I got to get in touch with them, right? And there's a past due bill. Now I can do a skip trace on him in the town that the restaurant is. All of a sudden, I found the guy's cell phone through a skip trace. I was able to get him on the phone, right? Those are things that we have to do in the commercial space in order to reach somebody, because that phone number at that office is it's not answering, and you see on Google that it says the business is temporarily closed, but they're temporarily closed. They're not closed. They're not a business. You do the skip trace. They're still registered with the Secretary of State, so they're an active corporation. So once again, as agencies, we learn in our business to turn over every rock, look under every rock, find everything that we can. But then it becomes the communication level, because what happens is, one of the things we did find is that we did reach people. Maybe it took an extra call, maybe it took an extra effort, but we wound up reaching people. And then it's the message, then it's the conversation that you're having. And then it's about this win-win scenario conversation, because once again, in a pandemic, it was hard enough for us to solicit sales during a pandemic. We call a credit manager up and ask them to use our agency. Think about trying to collect money, right? You're calling a business that is having hard times, and you're trying to figure out where are you in the pecking order in order to get your client paid. And we know we still got to get them paid. So once again, we'll talk about in a couple of minutes the regulatory issues we had to deal with and try to understand what we did in each state. All that went into the equation. But I hate to say it, it really is about having good people at your company. I mean, that's one of the things that AGA prides ourselves on. I'm sure Dom and his organization does the same way. Is that we have really good people who work for us, and so when you have good career tenured collectors, where this is their profession. This is not what they're doing for 2 years, until they find the next job. Primarily at our organization, we have career collectors. And so what happens is their livelihood is also dependent on this. They're making commission. Our collectors are all on their salary plus commission. So they recognize that if they don't do a good job and they don't collect money, then they're not bringing home, money to feed the family. And so I think what happens is that, we added some training, right? We added some levels of management, right? We increased our level of communication with our team at home in order to make sure that the messaging was consistent, right? And that they also, were, understood that, they weren't working out on an island by themselves, right? And then it was, implementing better skip tracing, having new messaging. And then at the end of the day, you have to have really good, if you think about what we do for a living, right? We call a company up and we try to take from them something which they don't want to give, but they wouldn't give our client in the first place who they actually bought it from, right? And now we're coming in 180 days later, and we have to be successful or we don't get paid.
And you have the benefit though of being that third party, and that third party intervention we've learned over the years is like
it helps.
Golden, sure,
absolutely. It helps, but if Dom and I don't collect money, we don't get paid, and the lights have to stay on in our building. So so all this leads into you have good people, you have a good strategy, you have good process, you got good communication, right? You got good management. Right, you eventually what you're going to hopefully do is deliver a good result, and
sure.
That's how it works, across the board.
And on the flip side,
I'm sure Dom would agree.
Yeah, I do. A lot of like as you mentioned, Sam, the skip trace was definitely crucial. On the flip side of that, though, our clients, when they went to a work from home environment, it was a little tougher. We found some slowdowns in obtaining supporting documentation and payment verifications.
Yes.
So that was a little tougher because, again, you put yourself in their shoes, our clients, they might be an organization of 5,000 employees, 2,000 employees, whatever, medium size, large size. And maybe they don't have the infrastructure so that they can quickly get those supporting documents, through a VPN and email them over to us. It was a little bit chunkier. So we did have to face that as part of what would we consider a communication issue with our clients. But we tried to use the cell phone during the pandemic, as we still are. The cell phone became the tool that we tried to use. Everyone's been glued to it that much more for updates, other topics that were coming out. People were bored. They were using their phones more. So we changed our messaging, just like Sam said. And in our emails, we knew that the commercial debtors were getting their work emails on their phones. We tailored it a little softer, a little bit more approachable. It wasn't quite as third-party hard as it normally would be. And we got their attention. We had to work harder, like Sam said, to get their attention, more calls, more emails, but it worked. It really did work because, again, they were glued to the phone.
Sure.
I think what we also saw, like last year, it was like about a year ago, this all happened. Like halfway through March, it all hit the fan. And in April and May, was confusion. Placements were down. As Dom just alluded to, people having problems with documentation. Like Dom and I were set up to go move to home, but I don't know if every corporation was. And so you had a lot of companies that were not set up, to transition like this, overnight, and they didn't have it in line. And so it took a lot of companies 2-3 months to get their stuff together. And we had to be patient with our clients during those periods of time. You have some of our clients that are in, rural areas of the country. They're not in big metropolitan areas. And so, they didn't have the infrastructure, the technology, the Wi-Fi. So I think what we saw is that we like April and May, we thought the world was ending in the collection agency world. I think we were all talking to each other like, oh my God, what's happening? And then in June, everything all of a sudden got better, right? And then what we wound up seeing is that we got and Don probably said the same thing. Over the summer months, there were times we got like dumps of files from people who all said, okay, we're back. We got everything set up. We're going to start placing again. We saw that.
Yeah, we saw that a lot at the association level with many of our agencies. If you thought that in April and May that there was a lot of confusion, you should have seen the confusion at the state level, especially in the regulatory, and we can switch to the next slide, the regulatory bodies, because all of a sudden there were these executive orders, right? The stay-at-home orders. Depending on the state, that's the dates of the stay-at-home orders were different, and to the extent that the stay-at-home orders were different. So at the association level, we looked at a couple of items. We looked at executive orders. We looked at federal laws. We looked at state and local regulations. We looked at branch office licensing, and then we looked at protecting the data. So I just want to go through that a little bit for the credit practitioners who are attending this to kind of understand what the agency does to stay at the level that they are, that makes them the superior agencies that they are. So I attended a meeting 2 weeks ago, and they said that at the present time, there are 350 bills that could affect the collection industry across the United States. And that was at the last count, 350. So how did we know what are in those bills? How can they affect it? At what status are they through the state legislatures? So what we do is we reach out to our colleagues and we find out where they are, what the likelihood of those are passing. And then we did a weekly update to all of our agencies. And in that weekly update, we said, hey, listen, this state has this going on, this state has this going on. Make sure that you are complying. Most of our agencies have a compliance department. If not a whole department, they have one person, depending on the size of the agency. So we would digest what was in the executive orders and the state laws, and then we would transmit that information to our agencies. Case in point, during the pandemic, there's the California licensing law. All of a sudden, there's a law in California that creates what's called like a mini CFPB. Now we can say, oh, well, is that for consumer debt? It is for consumer debt. However, these agencies, being the tenured agencies that they are, they know at some time, even though they're working a commercial claim, they may have to employ and comply with the regulations for consumer debt. So in California, we saw that this law came on the books, right? So we saw laws in Ohio. They were the laws were changing the statute of limitations. That was something that we had to keep abreast of. Then in Minnesota is a state that highly regulates collection agencies, commercial and consumer. If you're a collection agency, you do not do business in Minnesota unless you are properly licensed. We saw them issue a peacetime emergency order. That was continually extended, right? So that would mean that our collectors could work from home and collect debt in Minnesota. Same thing in Maryland, right? Now, the nuances are what were really interesting. In Maryland, the collectors, of course, could not receive payments at home, and they had to make sure that they were not storing data in their homes. So all the infrastructure that an agency had to spend money on was had to be kept up, and the compliance had to be there, and all of our agencies did that. Same thing with the state of Washington. They had a work from home order. Nevada, Illinois. Illinois is unique. I'm in Illinois, and Illinois has a 3-year license. One of the only states in the United States that has a 3-year license. To keep that license active during the pandemic, an agency had to send the names and addresses of all of their collectors to the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation within the state of Illinois. So all these nuances were really important. When you work with a certified agency, you can be reassured that that agency is doing everything they need to do to keep up that licensure, and they have an association that backs them up. Just yesterday, Connecticut, they issued a revised memorandum, and they said that they're taking a no action position, which means that you can continue to work from home. It's a huge thing because previous to the pandemic, we had branch licensing requirements that we had to comply with. Imagine if an agency had to license every single collector's home as a branch office. So Sam, to go back to what you were saying, in April and May, we were like, what's going on? There was possibility. We were like, well, wait a minute. How are we possibly going to license every collector that's at home? If you have, I don't care if you have 5 collectors or you have 100 collectors, that is a huge problem. Well, so those and I know both of your agencies. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. I can attest to what you just mentioned. The resources that you provided to us as part of the CCA of A helped us, but it helped our clients. I want you to know that we were able to pass on information to our clients who may have been using a firm that isn't certified, and then they came to find out that their other firm they may have been using wasn't following the guidelines, and it can
cause a huge problem.
Yeah, exactly. It gave them pause to rethink it and say, if this agency isn't going to sweat the details and comply with the regulations, we don't want that possibly coming back to us in any form of liability. So let's take our business to somebody who is certified through CCA of A.
Sure. Regulations are hard to deal with in a normal environment. Under a pandemic, I called it, they just got amped up.
I mean,
But,
you also do regulations on what you can and cannot do. So, I mean, you have all these regulations, then it's not, okay, what states can you collect in, what can't you collect in Nevada, and a cease and desist on collection activities. You have all these different things. And once again, this is why all of our collectors, are certified, by your association, and go through training and once again, that's why we do it. We want all of our collectors to understand, this information as well. And as Dom said, once again, we shared your information with our clients, as we needed to during the pandemic, because
absolutely.
this is the first time, this is the first time this has ever happened to all of us.
And hopefully the last.
Yes. So we've never experienced this before.
Yeah. So now let's switch topics. Let's go to given the move to more electronic means, such as the only contact a credit practitioner has with their customers is through a portal. How can, and I know that we did this immediately when, we got home, right? Because more and more infrastructure was being built by the clients. How can we help our clients discern whether an account is truly commercial in nature or consumer in nature? And Dom, you can start us out here.
Yeah, that was a challenge, no question about it. Most of our sophisticated clients are using a sales portal. There's no turning back. It's a great way to drive revenue further, faster, cheaper. But it created a challenge on the determination of what's consumer versus what's commercial, because sometimes a buyer would just go on the portal and just put in their personal information and purchase the equipment. And then we weren't sure when our client placed the account with us for collection, what it really was. So let's go back again. Skip trace was a big part of that. We would alert our clients, and many of their portals already have, I have to say this, the portals ask for the customer that's doing the purchasing to provide some proof of business incorporation. Are they a sole proprietorship? Asking for a business tax ID number. But sometimes their customers didn't always comply. So our skip trace was sort of where, when we got the account, we knew our clients are working from home. They couldn't get the information as robustly as they had in the past. So we would do the skip trace and say, look, this looks like on the surface, this is a consumer account. But as we looked into it further, we can see that there's a business operator of Joe Smith, and his business is the XYZ screwdriver company. Is this the same customer? In fact, can you confirm that with us? So we did the legwork, let them just take it from there, our clients, and then they confirm, yes, this is a repeat customer. They just put in their basic name and address, but it is a business. And we were able to sync that up and then move it into a commercial environment and relabel the transaction as a corporation or a DBA, something to that effect. So we helped them as much as we could.
Important. So very, very important, because, we just got done talking about regulations. There's certainly different regulations that we have to adhere to when we're collecting a consumer debt. Sam, did you find the same thing?
No, I'll be happy to say that it wasn't as big an issue for us, because, the largest majority of our clients are pure B2B companies. So, the probability of it happening with one of their customers is usually pretty small. However, we have segments of our client base, for example, like transportation, where, you've got, truckers that are sole proprietorships, but, we'll get a claim turned over to us against John A. Davis, right? And well, John A. Davis on the surface to my claimed inputter looks like a consumer. However, upon further review, it's John A. Sole proprietor. He's a trucker. He's a he works as an outsourced basis for one of the transportation companies, and he didn't pay his bill. But so sometimes it's the skip tracing. It's getting the credit application from our client to see what the name on the credit application is compared to what's on the invoice that we're receiving. However, like I said, it happens to us. We run through it all the time. I'll my claims group will say, hey, Sam, we just got these 25 claims out of 100 from this company, these all look like individuals. Well, guess what? They're all doctors, but they didn't put in there that they're doctors' offices, so they're all incorporated, but they were all doctors' offices that we were going after. So, you know
Sure.
what? We have to wind up doing a little bit of extra legwork. You know,
Absolutely.
this always goes back to what I talked about in the sessions I did with Matt a couple of weeks back. You know, I talked all about, you know, like onboarding with your customer, making sure you're on the same page with everything. And so that if you already know that your customer's business has a combination of consumer, commercial type accounts that look that way, what we normally recommend is, like, you know, the day you start working with them, make sure you understand the nuances behind it, right? So that you know when it happens, that you can quickly identify that account and make sure that you don't go through some crazy process for no reason, you know, that, you know, and that's something that, like we see that, like, you know, it actually happened recently, and I went back to my customer and said, okay, listen, I got all these accounts. I thought you guys were only B2B. She's like, oh yeah, these are all B2B. I'm like, well, these are people's names. Oh no, but those are, you know, individuals who own consulting companies, you know. And so, because every now and then you get one where a company, like, you know, let's say you're a gas company and some mom bought a thing of helium for her kid's birthday party from like a local wholesaler, you know, for $250 on a credit card, and the credit card got denied, you know, and then they turn it over to you and it's a person at their home. Well, okay, you can't go after that, right?
Sure.
I can't go after that. So,
You
so
know,
those will sneak in there, you know?
Yeah, you touched on something that, you know, the familiarity with your client system, right? So the clients now, you know, they're so used to the point-to-point, system-to-system. They've spent a lot of money in the infrastructure, like I said before. You know, sometimes the clarity isn't there. These companies that we're talking to, and I'm sure if this was a live system, a live session, you know, we would have a lot of interaction to tell us, you know, hey, you know, Annette, Sam, and Dom, we spent a lot of money investing in these systems. Now, I know that we are going to have to adapt, and I know that you know, how can we access the client system? How can that benefit the process, right? And I know, Sam, you're gonna talk about the ask from an agency, and then Dom, you're gonna talk a little bit about the security requirements. So Sam, why don't you start us out with the big ask that we have of our clients?
Give us access, you know? Listen, I think if you talk to everyone in my position, at any one of your members, right? Any agency member, they're going to tell you that they have the same, we all have the same exact problem, right? You know, and once again, this is not saying anything negative about any of our clients, all right? But like, why should I be expected to collect the same receivable as your internal people with only half the information that your internal people have? You know, when you place a file with an agency, the same way that your own internal collector at their fingertips has the contract, the invoices, the statement, all the information is there. That's what they need to collect. Well, that's what Dom and I need to collect also, right? So how do I get that information? Well, if you give me, there's two ways. Either one, you're going to pull it out of your system, create a PDF and email it to me, right? Or send it to me electronically through an SFTP site, or you're going to give me access to your system. Right. Quite honestly, I would rather have access to your system because I don't have to then do all the work with handle all the documentation day one. I can go in when I need it and pull it out. You know, my clients, my best clients, give me access to whether it's, you know, if they're an SAP or Oracle or HighRadius or Get Paid or Bill Trust or whatever system they're using that houses all their documentation. You know, giving us access to it really is the easiest way. And all those solutions have secure access where you can provide us just access to certain things. And what's funny is that I work with some of the leading technology firms in the world, and they give us access, right? And then I deal with other companies that are nowhere near that level of sophistication, and they're questioning us, right? And questioning our systems. And, you know, we got, you know, SOC 2 certification, and, you know, we got high level data security around, you know, we've got the highest controls on our systems. And some of these people are like, well, all you have to do is provide me a secure gateway to pull like this data. That's all I need. And so, you know, a lot of our clients have these systems. They put them in. They spend a lot of money, but they don't want to give access to a third party. And some of it's like, you know, their IT people say you can't have a third party access this. Well, why not? You know, if one company that's a Fortune 500 company's doing it. Why wouldn't this company, it's a Fortune 500 company, doing it? So going back to what you said initially, the ask is, give us everything you can, give us access, give us the information that we need.
In order to get that access, though,
Yeah.
Dom is going to tell us what we need to tell our clients in
Yeah.
order to get that access. And Dom, what is the golden ticket that we can give? And I'm sure every certified agency through the association is going to say the same thing, but why don't you tell us?
Yeah, that sometimes we got to be careful what we ask for, because when we get it, it can be really challenging protecting our clients' data. It's there's lengthy security questionnaires, like Sam mentioned. They're asking us to complete sometimes 100, 200, 300 questions in a questionnaire, so that we meet their security requirements. But it's worth it in the long run. Some of our clients have that multi-factor authentication, and some don't. We believe that the MFA is definitely best. Their portals have some redundancies in place for protection. That's great. But when you're using a third-party portal, most of what makes it secure happens on the other end, and that's where we come into play. And there's building blocks that we use to secure communication. And as you might expect, there's different aspects of security and stability in that environment that come into play at the workstation level for the collector at ABC, at AGA. The end user workstation is the front line in the cybersecurity fight, and servers, networking equipment, mechanical systems are traditionally where we put most of our efforts to harden the security and make them as redundant and fault tolerant as possible.
Sure. Yeah.
There's most malicious actors, or hackers, if you will, are going to target what they perceive to be the weak point, and that means the users and their workstations. And for this reason, and I should put in my pocket protector now to make my IT people feel proud, there's great lengths that we go to protect the workstation of our collectors. There's next-gen antivirus. We use Carbon Block to protect the workstation by employing real-time antivirus, crypto locker, and protection of network traffic analysis. There's VPNs, obviously, while outside of the office, here we are and work from home. We've got workstations that utilize a VPN tunnel to access the network of our company. There's automated maintenance where we use a variety of tools to keep the software versions of all endpoints current, to apply security, stability, updates monthly, because there's new vulnerabilities, as we see constantly, and they're being found and leveraged by malicious actors, as we will, keeping them patched, and it's absolutely critical. Firewall policies, all the workstations at our company are managed by centralized policies. They include strict firewall policies, minimizing the traffic allowed to and from the workstation. And lastly, routine vulnerability scanning. We also work with third-party cybersecurity experts to regularly scan all network connected devices. Some of our phones are connected just as much as their PCs and laptops, to follow strict remediation timelines. So it's exhaustive, it really is. And there's more to the list than what I covered. I tried to cover it. Like Sam mentioned, there's a security infrastructure that's housed in the SOC 2 certified data center that we employ. So there's so much going on. We love having the payment portal. We want the access, but boy, we have to do a darn good job of protecting that data. Otherwise, there's too many things are compromised, and
absolutely,
credibility is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. Most of our agencies in the association have the compliance, and they go for compliance testing like the SOC 2. So I guess the reassurance to the credit community is, when you use a certified agency, you absolutely have that conversation with the person that comes out to talk to you and ask them about that, because that is going to be part of the certification requirements. Right now it is to an extent, but we are going to beef that up, because if this year has taught us anything, it's that the security has to be there. We only have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to give kind of a first look at what we are seeing at the agency level when we analyze the account placement. One of the certification requirements that Dom's company and Sam's company adhere to annually, one of them is account placement. In fact, this particular one they do on a quarterly basis, and they submit not only the number of claims that are placed for collection, but they also do the dollar amount of claims. And you can say, well, why do we do that? One of our most important goals at Commercial Collection Agencies of America is to create resources and supply those resources to the credit grantors, education, but also resources. And if we can give a report on a quarterly basis to the credit grantors to say, hey, this is what's happening, and also to our agencies, it creates a great deal of insight. So when we look back at the 2020 data, quite frankly, we were surprised in some areas, and then we weren't so surprised in other areas. As volatile as 2020 was in our regular life, that's what we found out as the numbers panned out. So for the purposes of today, with only a little bit of time left, of course, we will be issuing a report in its entirety, but I kind of wanted to give a first look and tell you of how 2020 stacked up. In Q1, we had 2 full months of regular activity before states went on lockdown. And by Q2, 100% of our agencies were in a work from home environment, at least some of it. And sporadically, some collectors would come into the office, limited number of staff, alternate days. We found that the only real staff that was coming in on a consistent basis in Q2 were the accounting folks. Most of the collectors were in a work from home environment. When we compared Q1 to Q2 of 2020, we found that the claims placed with third-party agencies, our members, decreased by 10%, while the dollar amount increased by 5%. So what that told us were that there were less claims, but for larger dollar amounts. So that's what we found when we compared Q1 to Q2. As we said, Q2, for the most part, agencies were working from home, getting adjusted to the state requirements like we talked about before, finding the new normal. When we got to Q3, which is usually the time when historically we've seen the lowest number of placements. Some states had positivity numbers also during that time, that they were the lowest that they had been, especially in September. And at that time in Q3, we also saw that agencies were transitioning some of their staff more because of those low positivity rates back into their offices. So we looked at the numbers of Q2 and compared them to Q3. As expected, the number of claims placed with third parties increased by over 5%. Well, it was also expected the dollar amount of those claims place increased by 4% from Q2 to Q3. So now we're at Q3 to Q4. Couple of things to remember. Historically, Q3 registers the lowest amount of claims, right? Before pandemic. The other thing to remember is consistently, if you see a change of over 8%, it's significant. So when we looked at Q3 to Q4, we found that the number of claims placed with third-party agencies increased a whopping 10.45%, while the dollar amount of those claims placed decreased by 7.76%, almost 8%. So the result, a smaller average claim being placed for collection. Then the last bit of information that we wanted to share was we took Q4 and we said, okay, Q4, we've been at this a whole year, almost a whole year. How does that compare back to Q1? So we wanted to gauge the impact of the pandemic on placements. Now, we at the association have the benefit of a lot of historical trend analysis. So we know that at the beginning of an economic downturn, numbers are up. However, the longer that economic downturn lasts, the worse it is for the collection industry. When we looked at Q4 and compared it to Q1, we found that 2/3 of our agencies experienced a decrease in the number of claims that they received, while 1/3 experienced an increase. So to our association, this was not surprising. The number of claims placed with third-party agencies rose by 4% when we compared Q4 to Q1. Now, remember, I said only 1/3 of the agencies experienced an increase, but those increases were so significant by the 1/3 of those agencies that they caused that 4% increase. Very interesting. What was surprising was the percentage of change when it came to the dollars placed between Q1 and Q4. Surprisingly, and perhaps kudos to the credit community, you folks, you recognized the importance of placing claims with third-party agencies, even during a pandemic. The dollar amount of the claims increased by 1.4% when we compared Q4 back to Q1. So we're going to study the pandemic like everybody else. I think this is going to be studied for hundreds of years, but the association will continue to monitor the impact. And we also will take the numbers from 2020 and then look back to our previous years. So just a little spotlight into it. I know we are short of time, but we thank you very much for sticking with us. I want to thank Sam and Dom, you guys, a lot of information, a lot of preparation, and on behalf of the association, we're just proud to present with you. And just the last thing, just if anybody has any questions, the information is in the deck. Hopefully that will be, Matt, is that going to be sent out to folks? Or at least here it is, it's on the screen. If you need to get a hold of Dom, you need to get a hold of Sam, or certainly the association, please feel free. Hopefully we will see you soon at an in-person meeting of CRF. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you. And
everybody.
this information certainly will be shared with everybody. Boy,
Great.
chock full of detail, learnings, foresight, and opportunity, I think, for the credit community to better their operations. I know we're short on time. I want to share some takeaways that I have from this. And I put it into an acronym. It's FACTOR, right? You talked about so much information. You talked about flexibility, the ability to change your business, change your messaging, change the way you operate. There was adaptability. You talked about a softer touch in the beginning on how you worked with customers, how you work with debtors, et cetera. There was communication with staff. Dom, love the knowledge share. You went from, I think it was a 1.25 colleague to manager ratio to a 1.8 to affect that communication and keep it tight. Sam, you talked about the same thing. There was training and more frequent touch points for folks, right? This was, again, how do you better your operation and how do we move forward from a work from home environment? And the last piece was the regulatory environment. You know, compliance. How do you protect the creditor is so important, I think, for folks to understand that through the association, through Annette's group, that they are protecting the customer, meaning the credit practitioner, from all of the regulatory environments that are out there, making sure that the agencies are complying and acting in the best interest of their customer, which is us, the practitioner. 3 other points. It's about the people. Technology is so critically important. And how important is that certification process? I want to close with that. Annette and Sam and Dom, I want to thank you, right? It was great to have such a great panel discussion and 3 professionals in front of us. We can't thank you enough for the knowledge share and for all of the support that you provide to the foundation. We are extremely grateful for all that you do. And Annette, I'm going to close it also with what you said. We look forward to being with everybody in person real soon, as soon as we can. The names and contact detail are on the screen. I know these folks are here to support you. If you have any questions, please reach out to them direct or reach out to CRF and we will connect you with them. So I hope you have a great day. Thank you again for listening, and
Appreciate you having me.
safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.